did the Chinese discover America over half a century before Columbus. In the year 1405, a Chinese eunuch named Zheng He launched the first of his 7 voyages west from China that took him across the Indian Ocean. For the next 3 decades, until his death in 1433, he was in command of the world's largest fleet of ships, all funded by the Chinese Ming Emperor Yongle. During those 7 voyages, he reached the east coast of Africa and the Persian Gulf. This is all known history, but the discovery of a map titled General Chart of the Integrated World throws light on the theory that Zheng He travelled much further, even reaching the shores of America 74 years before the heralded arrival of Christopher Columbus. This 18th century copy of a map dated from 1418 claims to show the New World discovered by Zheng He. This map only came to light in the year 2001 when it was bought by a Shanghai lawyer for $500. Liu Gang, the buyer of the map, believes that Zheng He navigated his way to the North and South Poles, the Americas, the Mediterranean, and Australia. In 2003, Gavin Menzies, a British submarine engineer and historian, used the map as evidence for his book, 1421, The Year China Discovered the World. The map in question shows 2 hemispheres, depicts the round shape of the Earth on flat paper. The contours of North and South America are clear. The Arctic is shown, as are the Himalayas, where Zheng He was born, among its foothills. The continents are easily recognizable. However, despite this evidence, Europeans do not want to believe this map, as only their maps contained such details and didn't appear until much later. Another question about the authenticity of the map is that the Arctic didn't appear on Chinese maps until 1593. There is no dispute that both Columbus and Zheng He sailed the seas, but their purposes were very different. Columbus sailed purely for reasons of discovery and attaining wealth for himself and his benefactors, the Spanish royal family, through whatever assets he and his men could acquire on these voyages of discovery. Zheng He had a more diplomatic purpose in mind. His goal was to reach out to existing populations, bring envoys back to China, and pay homage to the Chinese Emperor Yongle. However, once that Zheng He's life had ended, as well as that of the emperor, the exploration by sea ended, and with a new emperor in place who did not wish to fund such ventures, China largely became isolated, as it largely closed itself off from the rest of the world. During this period, Europeans extended their voyages of discovery, recording these finds, and the Chinese remained isolated from the world. Although the Europeans claim Columbus discovered America, there was already a population of what became known as Native Americans living there, and they were not originally native to that land either. Let us take another look at that map that brought these theories to life in 2001. Gavin Menzies was convinced of the authenticity of the map, heading a seminar in March 2002 at London's Royal Geographical Society. He provided evidence to support his theory that Zheng He arrived in America more than 70 years before Columbus. His evidence of maps dated before the time of Columbus left Menzies convinced of Zheng He's voyage and that he should be credited with discovering America. His research included 14 years of poring over maps and other artifacts, including navigation charts penned by Zheng He, and that during 1421 to 1423 he navigated his ships around the southern tips of South America and South Africa. During his lifetime, Zheng He oversaw the building of 1,622 ships and made at least 7 voyages that are listed from 1405 until his death in 1433. His ships included some of the largest ships to have existed at that time, more than 6 times the size of those sailed by Christopher Columbus. The official recorded history of his voyages state he visited Franca, which refers to not only France, but also Portugal and the Netherlands, where the people were described as being tall, with red hair and beards. The only way he could have reached those lands was via the Cape of Good Hope around South Africa, or Cape Horn, the southern tip of South America. Unfortunately, after the death of Zheng He, most of the records of his voyages were destroyed, and the building of ships was limited to no more than 3 masts, so records of his journeys, which may have included the Americas, are not available. His achievements are testament to the skill of Chinese mariners and their ability to explore the world's oceans, but by choosing to isolate itself from the world, Chinese voyages of discovery were soon overtaken by those explorers from Europe. There are also several reports that counterclaim the reasons why China did not discover America, adding that East Asian nations simply let the Europeans colonize the Americas and thus achieve world dominance. While Zheng He sailed the Indian Ocean with ships much larger than any sailed by the West during that period, and with fleets of hundreds of ships commanding thousands of men, these expeditions were colossal compared to the number of ships of Columbus or a similar sized fleet led by Magellan. So why were the small kingdoms of Western Europe successful in reaching and later colonizing the Americas, while these vast flotillas from China did not? One explanation is that Zheng He did not discover any new routes or new lands. His missions were simply to establish trade with known nations. China also had lots of commodities the West craved for, and little of value to the Chinese in return. Strong advantages for the European explorers were the winds making the voyage across the Atlantic, together with some sizable islands for replenishment, much easier than a treacherous, much longer journey across the Pacific Ocean. While Columbus took the credit for discovering America without actually stepping foot on the American mainland, and his belief he had found a new route to Asia, and not aware his discovery was in fact a new continent, there had been groups of explorers before him that go largely unrecognized. The first of these discoveries took place more than 20,000 years prior to Columbus. The ancestors of Native Americans had arrived into what is now the American continent from Northeast Asia in several waves, following animals migrating across the land bridge that existed at that time to connect the two continents. Those arrivals over several centuries moved south, some travelling as far as what is now South America. While Polynesians crossed the Pacific to reach the west coast of South America sometime between 600 and 1000 AD. And the Inuit of the northeast coast of Canada encountered the Norsemen under the command of Leif Erikson in the late 10th century in the first known crossing of the Atlantic. All this centuries before the arrival of Christopher Columbus in 1492. So who is to say a similar voyage was not undertaken by Zheng He? Because they did not stay and colonize these lands does not mean a voyage was not undertaken. Stone Age peoples were able to cross the Pacific well before technology and more advanced seafaring nations arrived. So can we really conclude that Europeans reached the Americas before the Chinese simply on the theory that it was easier to cross the Atlantic? The advantages of the Pacific. The Pacific has the advantages of numerous fertile islands from Southeast Asia and offering stepping stones further into the center of the Pacific. It was from these lands that the Polynesians eventually reached New Zealand from about the 14th century to become the first settlers in those lands. So equally, the Chinese could have travelled in the opposite direction, using these islands and trading with tribal people that frequented many of these small islands before the arrival of European explorers. While Zheng He is widely regarded as China's greatest explorer for his exploits, across the Indian Ocean and beyond, in 2500 BC, maritime traders had connected several coastal cities from Egypt to India. Roman ambassadors are believed to have used these routes to travel as far as China in 166 AD. While Roman merchants reached China, Gan Ying was sent to Rome as a Chinese envoy in 97 AD, yet he only reached as far as the Persian Gulf. Evidence shows there were more envoys and missionaries traveling to China than Chinese heading west. In conclusion, rather than asking the question, did China reach the Americas first, we could ask how things would have altered had they discovered America first. The answer to that is nothing would have changed, as China was not looking to colonize, purely to trade. So if they went there, found no large civilizations, they simply went elsewhere. Then the Europeans arrived later, and their intention was to colonize and plunder the wealth they found. There was little value in America for the Chinese. That is all for this video. If you have enjoyed watching, and it has shown you a little detail of life here in China, then your subscribing to my channel would mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching. Make sure you click on the link to the next video, and until the next time, goodbye for now.